Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us on this webinar. My name is Fiona Borthwick. I'm Head of Sales and Account Management here at PTFS Europe. And the webinar today is a follow-on to one that we did last month, where I provided an overview of the Koha cataloguing tools that are available. So this just takes it to the next stage, where we look specifically at what you can do with Koha to batch catalogue your batch edit your catalogue records and items. So we'll be looking at some of the tools that are available. So this is what we're going to be looking at today. We shall start by having a look at the relevant permissions that you can set up for your user logins. There's a few system preferences that I'll draw your attention to. The majority of the session will be looking at what batch edit tools are available, and we'll touch on the batch item deletion tools. We'll look at how you can use reports to generate your files to assist you with this process, and we'll finish up by having a look at the mark modification templates and how they can be utilised as well. So let's start by having a look at the associated permissions. So as you may or may not be aware, anybody that logs into Koha has a set of permissions assigned to their login, and that determines what access they have to Koha and what functions they can do. So when you look at the user permissions, there is a set under the tools area which relate to the batch edit options. So you can give users to all of these, or you can be quite restrictive. So for example, it may be that you want to give some of your staff access to be able to perform batch deletions of items, which is its own permission, or you may want to give them access to be able to modify items in batch, but not both. So you can be selective and assign permissions to your staff as relevant. If you're giving access into batch modification of items, you can actually take it one stage further if you want and assign the permission to limit the batch item modifications to specific subfields. So in a wee while, we'll have a look at this on screen and you'll see what I mean by this subfields and how you can restrict the editing of those in particular. And then we have the ones that relate to the catalogue records themselves. So again, there's different permissions to be able to perform a batch deletion of records and a modification of records. So it may be that you give staff access to be able to modify item records, but not the actual catalogue records themselves. So it's quite granular, and I would urge you to take a look at these if you're using Koha and you want to start using the batch editing tools. In terms of system preferences, I just wanted to highlight a few here. This one is the one I've just talked about. So subfields to allow for restricted batch mod. So this allows you to specify which fields a user that has permission to do batch edits of items should be allowed to edit. In that previous screen, you saw that was a separate permission. So you can just allow them to be able to batch modify items without putting any restriction on it. But if you want to restrict which fields they can edit, then you've got the ability to do so here by building up a string of subfields. The area at the top here are more to display and process options. So you've got, when we'll be looking at the screen in a bit, you can see that it will display up to a number of records that are specified here. So maximum items to display for batch deletions. By default, in our system, it's set to show up to 1,000 items for a single item batch deletion, and that's what it will display on the screen. For the batch modifications, it will show up to 20 at one time. And then to process, so this is how many item records is it going to perform a batch edit on at one time. And we've got that set to 1,000. A recommendation is not to set that too high, because obviously the higher the quantity of batch edits you're doing at one time, you know, the slower that transaction may actually take place. So we want to avoid any pressures on the server. So we'd recommend keeping that to around about the 1,000. So you can batch edit up to 1,000 items in one go. So those are the system preferences to be aware of. These are our batch editing tools that are all found within the cataloging area. So we've got batch item modification, batch item deletion, which relate to the item records, so the physical copy records. Then we've got the batch record modification and deletion, and this refers to our catalogue records. And then we've got the mark modification templates area as well, which we'll be talking about in a few minutes' time. So just to reiterate, there is a difference between the items and the records, and as we've just previously discussed, they do have different permissions. So you can really allow control of which staff can perform these batch edits on items versus your catalogue records. In all cases, you start the process by entering in which records you want to change. So you can do that in a number of ways. You can enter the barcodes manually by typing them in or scanning them in, or the biblio numbers if you are referring to catalogue records, or you can use a file. So you may have already identified a list of records that you want to edit and have those barcodes in some kind of file, and you can upload that file. And we can use a report as well, which I'll show you in a few minutes. When you use these tools, you do get all the current records with their details populated on screen for you to review. You've got some options to export the data. That can be useful if, for example, you're performing a batch item deletion and you maybe want to just keep a note of all those records. You can export them to a CSV file, for example, before you undertake the deletion. When you're batch editing, you can change several values at the one time, and I'll show you how to do that. You can also remove values from items. So if you wanted to blank certain characteristics out of an item record, you've got the ability to do that. You can also make it a little bit more complicated by using regular expression on some of the fields. And something that is maybe a little more unknown is actually you can use the batch item modification tool to check items in batch as well. And you can also check items in at the point of editing their values. And once you've made your changes, you can have a look and see the job that's in the queue, and then you can obviously view the results as well. So let's have a look at how this works. So I'm just going to jump out into Koha. So this is my batch item modification tool. Quite a simple screen. You can see we can use a file, so we can upload a file from the desktop. So we can either have a barcode file or an item number file. So again, a reminder that item refers to the actual copy records themselves, the actual physical items. Or we can put our barcodes in one at a time. So let me just add some in. Now, note here it does say 1 barcode per line, so I just have to hit my carriage return. Or if you're scanning these items in, ensure that it's got carriage return at the end of it as well. 64234363 and 6402. So I'll just use these 4. The other option you have here is to use the default values. So you can overwrite everything that you've got in your records using the values from the default framework, which I would recommend that you don't do because you don't want to reset all your values in here. So I've got my 4 items identified. I'm just going to click continue. And we can see here that we've got our our consistent view on the screen with a table. We can column sort them if we want using the arrows, and you've got the option here to show all columns and to hide columns as well from the top. If you had a long list and you needed to see if a particular item was in that list, then you can search just like you can in Koha in general, search within your tables. And over here is where you can export So if I wanted to, as I said, especially if I was deleting items, if I wanted to take a copy of the data and export it into Excel or whatever, or print it off, then I've got the ability to do that from here. So these are my 4 records that I put the barcodes in for. These happen to be children's books. Some of them, like my dog, never says please indicate that, but I'm just telling you they are children's material. What I want you to notice is this top one, the Pizza Mystery, has a collection code assigned to it for non-fiction, but the other 3 do not have a collection code. And if we have a look at the shelving location, the Pizza Mystery has a shelving location of fiction, but the other 3 are at general shelves. And I'm highlighting those because those are the ones that I'm going to change and show you. So this is the top half of the screen. So these are the current values of these item records. And the bottom half of the screen is where I'll need to make my changes. So I mentioned about subfields and how you can allocate a login to have permission to do these batch item edits, but restrict which subfields they can edit. And by the subfields, that's what I'm referring to, where it's got a numerical value next to it. So your loss status is subfield 1, or it's got a letter next to it. So shelving location is subfield C, for example. Now we can see that each of these have got a shelving location. If I wanted to blank that out for any reason, then I can do so by hitting the little arrow here, the checkbox here, and it tells me that it will delete that subfield for me, which I don't want to do, but that's a way of of taking data out of the item records if you wanted to do that. And I mentioned that you've got regular expression options. So these are available within certain fields here as well, but we're not going to look at that today. At the bottom of the screen, well, before we show the bottom of the screen, just to go back to the regular expression, it's only available on some fields, and those are the fields that are textual based. So those that are policy controlled, like shelving location, where there's a drop down list, you can only make a selection from that list. And then down at the bottom, you can do batch item edits to exclude these items from local holds priority, and this is where you can check them in as well. So again, collection code and shelving location. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign a collection code of fiction to all of these items. So I'm overriding the non-fiction collection code in here. I'm changing that, I'm editing it, but I'm also adding fiction to these empty values as well. And I'm going to change my shelving location to the children's area. So I'm making these 2 selections, and then I'm going to save that. It tells me that the job has been enqueued and it'll be processed as soon as possible. And I can go and do a new batch modification if I want, or I can have a look at the job. So by the time I've clicked on this job, it tells me it's finished, and it tells you when the job started and when it ended. And just to show you, the changes have taken effect. So all 4 items now have children's area as their shelving location and fiction as their collection code. So that did exactly what I was expecting it to do. Just come back into the presentation, just to go on to the talk about batch item deletions now. Again, they're permission controlled, and I highlighted those permissions in the earlier slide. When you go into the batch item deletion screen and you put in your details of what you want to delete, you will get your list for final review in here as well. You can see, and I'll show this on screen in a moment, you can see a couple of these are highlighted in yellow, which means that they cannot be deleted, and I'll explain why in a moment. And at the bottom of the screen here, you've got a flag where you can optionally choose to delete catalogue records as well if no items remain. So if you're deleting the final copy, then you might want to delete the catalogue record as well. So let's have a look at an example of that one. So again, we're in the tool here, and as before, I could upload a file if I wanted to, or I can put in my barcode numbers. So let me just stick these in. Okay, so I've got my 4 barcodes. Again, you've got the ability to export. And what we can see here is that it's pulled through these 4 items for me. And the reason that these two have got yellow crosses and highlighted in yellow is because item has a waiting hold in both cases. So Koha's not going to allow me to just delete items that have got any outstanding activity on them. So even when I'm using a batch process, it's still going to stop. So I would have to go and clear down those holds before I could delete these items. But from here, I do have 2 selected, so I could go ahead and delete those if I wanted to. Okay. Reports can be very helpful when you're working with batch edit tools. So we can use a report to generate a list of records and then automatically send that list to the batch item. So here's an example. This report here, which I'm going to show you on screen, has found 48 items, and I've got a batch operation facility here. So let's just have a wee look at that one. So this is my report that I've run. So it's a list of items marked lost or missing, and it's set to show me 20 rows per page currently, but I can see from the top of the screen that it has found 48. So because we've output information that has something like an item number, or perhaps we'd output a barcode or a biblio number or anything, it's then going to give me the option to send these to do batch operations. So in this case, it's saying batch operations with 20 visible records. So it's only the first 20 on that page. But if I want to send them all, I'll change that to 50. And then it'll say batch operations now with my 48 visible records. And from there, I can click on there and I can go straight to the batch item modification or the batch item deletion. So this report was run to give me a list of items that have been marked as lost or missing. So maybe now all I want to do is take them to the batch deletion tool and delete them from there. So I've got the ability to do that. And again, it will flag up any that can't be deleted for whatever reason. So the use of reports here is really quite useful. Now moving on to talk about the editing of the catalogue records, and specifically looking at mark modification templates. So these templates are used for editing mark records, and they can be applied when importing records as well. And essentially, the templates are set up, and there's a basic script which uses actions to copy data from one field to another, to move data about, to add, update, and delete. So let's have a look at these, because it's much easier to put it into context when you're having a look at them. So this is the list of mark modification templates we have set up in our system. I'm going to come in and have a look at this one at the bottom here, which is our suppress records. And if I come in to edit the actions, it'll show us what this template's set to do. Now I've picked this template initially because it's only got one action associated with it. And that action is to add something to the record. So suppress records, that will hide those catalogue records from the public view in the OPAC. So a good example, if I just go back to where I was, I provided that list of items that are marked missing or lost. So perhaps I don't want those records to be visible on the OPAC. Rather than having to go through them individually to hide them, I can apply this mark modification template to say, suppress all of these records. So let's have a look at this. What this action does is it's going to add a new subfield in 942 field with the value of 1, which is, so the 942 subfield N in the mark catalogue record is the Koha field for suppressing records. And then you've got your value of suppress or not suppress. And if I just show you that very quickly, if I go into administration, if I go to my authorized values area, and if I just look up the suppress authorized value, we've got 2 here. So the value of 1 means suppress in the OPAC. So if I was to run this template, it's going to assign that value of 1 into that subfield, which has the effect of suppressing all my records. I'll show you how you assign the template in just a moment. But if I come on to page 2, and if I have a look at this template here for import Parker library, this one has multiple actions on it. And the first thing to say is you can rank the order of them, and you can use the tools here to change that order if you want. So in this case, we've got a copy and replace action. So that's the first action, and it's got a specific thing. Copy and replace if this exists. So if 852 subfield J exists, then copy and replace it, and so on. And then I can update. My next action would be update existing, add a new field to the $951 field with the value of Parker, and so on. So we've got all the different actions that you can do here. And again, you can come in and have a look and see exactly what it is doing. And it's useful to put descriptions in as well, so that when you come back and look at it later, you can see what that action was actually for. Okay, so if I just have a look though, whilst I'm in this edit box, if I just click my drop down there, you can see that you've got your different options here for your actions. So this is where you can build up your templates to do what you want to do. You can edit them at any time and you can update them, or you can add new actions to existing templates. So we can put, details here. We can add a 5th one onto here and so on. If I was to go to create a new template, what it asks me to do is to duplicate a template, which is quite handy, so I'm not having to start from scratch. Obviously, I could duplicate it and then just make my relevant edits. So where does this all fall into place? Well, again, if we go back into our cataloguing screen, our batch editing tools here, if we go into, you've got access here to your mark modification templates, so again, if I just click into there to show you where it is, you've again got your tools on your left-hand side as well, which is just where we were, but just to show you, you get to it from your cataloguing screen. The batch record modification area is where you select your template. So this is where we would say that we are making changes to a list of catalogue records. So we can upload a file, or we can enter a list of record numbers. So this is your biblio number for your catalogue records, or we can use Koha lists. So it may be that you've set up a list to identify the items that you want to do the batch edit on the catalogue records for, and then you can just find that list from here. So let's just say I wanted to update my list, my catalogue records, which reside in my Spanish 2 list, and then I can select the relevant templates, and it would update the records when I click to continue. The other place where you can assign a mark modification template is when you're staging the records for import as well. So this is, let me just quickly come into my desktop. And if I just upload a file here, so an ebooks file, so a mark file of data that I've got from, say, a supplier. And at this point here, you have all the stuff about your record matching, but you've also got the ability to assign a mark modification template at this point as well. So that would be if you're uploading items into your catalogue, you can actually specify how certain fields in the catalogue record should be populated by using one of these templates. So it's a really good bit of functionality, but it's a little bit complex, and just this webinar was just to provide a very brief overview into it. So that really completes the batch editing tools, and I'm almost out of time. So just to remind you that we do run 2 webinars per month, and you can have you can see all the details on our website. And registration is via Eventbrite, but all links are available on our website. This screen just shows you some upcoming webinars we're doing over the next couple of months. And of course, we do publish everything to our YouTube channel, so do subscribe to that if you haven't done already. So thank you very much for joining me this afternoon, and I hope you found that useful.